The trading post at Devil's Creek sat at the crossroads of civilization and wilderness, where honest merchants rubbed shoulders with outlaws, and where a man could buy anything from sugar to stolen goods without anyone asking uncomfortable questions. Jake Morrison had ridden 30 miles through hostile territory to buy supplies for his remote ranch, but what he found inside Murphy's trading post made him forget all about flour and ammunition. "Go in once for $50. Murphy called out to the crowd of rough men gathered around a wooden platform at the back of the store. $50 for a young Apache girl, maybe 14 years old, strong and healthy. Jake pushed through the crowd, his blood running cold as he saw what was happening. A young Apache girl stood on the makeshift auction block, her hands bound behind her back, her dark eyes blazing with defiance despite her obvious exhaustion. She wore traditional Apache clothing that was torn and dirty, and there were rope marks on her wrists that spoke of rough treatment. "Who's got 60? Murphy continued, clearly enjoying his role as auctioneer. "She'd make a fine servant." Or, he let the unspoken implications hang in the air, drawing crude laughter from some of the men. Jake felt sick. Human trafficking was illegal in the territory, but in places like Devil's Creek, far from any law enforcement, such niceties were often ignored. The girl's captors, 3 disreputable trappers Jake recognized as the Hartley Brothers, stood to one side, counting money and drinking whiskey while their victim was sold like livestock. 65, called out a bearded man with yellow teeth and hands that looked like they'd never seen honest work. Jake studied the girl more carefully, noting the proud set of her shoulders and the way she held her head high despite her circumstances. She was probably closer to 16 than 14, with the kind of natural beauty that would make her a target for the worst kind of men. But it was her eyes that caught his attention, dark, intelligent, and full of a fierce spirit that captivity hadn't broken. 70, shouted another bidder, a thin man with the look of someone who preyed on the vulnerable. Jake made a decision that surprised even himself. $100. The crowd turned to stare at him, and Murphy's eyes lit up with greed. 100. From the gentleman, anyone wanted to go higher. 120, countered the bearded man, glaring at Jake with obvious hostility. 150, Jake said calmly, his hand resting casually on his gun belt in a way that suggested he was prepared to back up his bid with more than money. The bearded man took a step toward Jake, but stopped when he saw the confident way the rancher wore his weapons. Jake Morrison had a reputation in these parts. He was known as a fair man who minded his own business, but also as someone who could be dangerous when crossed. Going once, going twice. Sold to Mr. Morrison for $150. As Jake counted out the money, he could feel the girl's eyes on him, trying to understand why a stranger would pay so much for her freedom. He wondered the same thing himself. He'd just spent nearly 3 months' worth of ranch profits on an impulse that could get him killed if the girl decided to run back to her tribe and bring warriors down on his head. Pleasure doing business with you, Morrison, Murphy said with an oily smile. You want me to throw in some rope and chains? Sometimes these Apache girls can be difficult. That won't be necessary, Jake replied coldly. He approached the platform where the girl stood, waiting, her dark eyes watching his every move. Up close, he could see old scars on her arms and a fresh bruise on her cheek that made his jaw clench with anger. Do you speak English? He asked quietly. Some, she replied, her voice hoarse but clear. I'm going to untie your hands. I want you to know that I don't intend to hurt you or keep you prisoner. Do you understand? She studied his face intently, as if trying to read his soul. Why you by me? Because what they were doing was wrong, Jake said simply. He cut the ropes binding her wrists, noting how she rubbed the circulation back into her hands without taking her eyes off him. What you want me do? Jake considered the question carefully. He hadn't thought past the moment of buying her freedom, and now he was faced with the reality of what came next. First, I want to get you away from here. These men are dangerous, and I don't trust them not to cause trouble. They kill my family, she said quietly, her voice flat with controlled grief. Take me to sell like horse. Jake felt a surge of protective anger. They won't hurt you again. I promise you that. As they prepared to leave the trading post, Jake overheard one of the Hartley brothers talking to his companions. That Morrison fellow thinks he's smart, buying himself an Apache whore. But maybe we should follow him. See if we can't get our property back. Might be worth it, agreed another. That girl's worth more than 150 to the right buyer. Jake made sure. His rifle was loaded and easily accessible as they mounted up. The girl, he still didn't know her name, rode the extra horse he'd brought with the skill of someone born to the saddle. She seemed alert, but not panicked, scanning their surroundings with the wariness of someone who'd learned not to trust. "What's your name?" Jake asked as they put distance between themselves and the trading post. "Aiyana," she replied. "It mean eternal blossom. I'm Jake Morrison. I have a ranch about 20 miles north of here. You take me to ranch as slave?" The question cut Jake to the heart. "No, Aiyana. I don't believe in slavery. I bought you to free you, not to own you." She was quiet for a long moment, processing this. "Then why? Why spend much money for a Apache girl you not know?" Jake struggled to find words for feelings he didn't fully understand himself. "Because I have a sister about your age. Because what those men were doing was evil. Because," he paused, searching for honesty, "because I couldn't live with myself if I walked away and left you there. Your sister. She Apache too?" "No, she's white. Lives back east with our aunt. But that doesn't matter. You're someone's daughter, someone's sister. You deserve better than being sold like an animal." Aiyana rode in thoughtful silence for several miles before speaking again. "Hartley Brothers, they follow us." Jake had been watching their back trail and had seen the dust cloud too. "Yes. Are you strong enough to ride hard if we need to?" "I am strong," she said with quiet pride. "Apache women are always strong." "Good. Because I think we're going to need to be." The pursuit began in earnest as the sun started to set, painting the desert landscape in shades of red and gold. The Hartley brothers and 2 other men rode hard, clearly intent on recapturing their valuable property. Jake led Aiyana off the main trail, using his knowledge of the terrain to try to lose their pursuers in the maze of canyons and mesas that characterized this part of the territory. There, Aiyana pointed to a narrow gap between 2 rock formations. "My people use this place to hide." Jake trusted her judgment and guided his horse into the gap, which opened into a hidden canyon with a small spring and enough grass for the horses. It was a perfect hiding place, invisible from the main trail. "How did you know about this place?" Jake asked as they dismounted. "My grandfather bring me here when I was child. He say Apache always remember the hiding places of our ancestors. They made a cold camp, not daring to light a fire that might give away their position." As darkness fell, they could hear the Hartley brothers searching nearby, their voices carrying on the still night air. "They're in here somewhere," one of them called. $150 doesn't just disappear. "Maybe we should give up." "Joe," said another voice, "Morrison's got a reputation with a gun. That Apache girl's worth 5 times what he paid." Joe Hartley replied, "There's men in Mexico who'd pay top dollar for her. We're not giving up." Aiyana listened to the conversation with growing tension. "They not stop," she whispered to Jake. "They follow until they catch or we kill them." Jake nodded grimly. He'd reached the same conclusion. The Hartley brothers were the worst kind of men, greedy, violent, and without conscience. They wouldn't give up their pursuit easily. "Aiyana," he said quietly, "I need to ask you something important. If something happens to me, if I can't protect you anymore, do you know how to get back to your people?" "Yes, but what you mean, if something happen?" "I mean those men out there aren't going to give up, and I won't let them take you back to that trading post or anywhere else they want to sell you. Which means I might have to fight them." Aiyana studied his face in the dim starlight. "You would die for Apache girl you just meet. I'd die before I'd let them hurt you again," Jake said simply. "That's what good people do. They protect those who can't protect themselves." "Then I fight with you," Aiyana said with quiet determination. "My father teach me to use knife. Bow, I not helpless." Jake felt a surge of respect for this remarkable young woman who'd endured capture, abuse, and the threat of being sold into slavery, yet still had the courage to stand and fight. "All right, but we do this smart. We wait for them to come to us, use the terrain to our advantage." As they prepared for what might be their final battle, Jake found himself wondering how His life had changed so dramatically in just one day. This morning he'd been a solitary rancher concerned mainly with cattle and horses. Now he was preparing to fight to the death for a young Apache woman. He'd known for less than 12 hours, but looking at Aiyana's brave face in the starlight, he knew he'd made the right choice. Some things were worth fighting for, and human dignity was one of them. Subscribe to our channel to see if Jake and Aiyana can survive the deadly pursuit. Hit that notification bell for more thrilling Western adventures. Dawn came slowly to the hidden canyon, bringing with it the sound of horses and voices as the Hartley brothers resumed their search. Jake and Aiyana had spent the night taking turns on watch, and both were exhausted but alert. The pursuers were getting closer, their voices echoing off the canyon walls as they systematically checked every possible hiding place. "We know you're in here somewhere, Morrison." Joe Hartley's voice boomed across the rocks. "Why don't you save us all some trouble and come out? We just want the girl back. You can keep your money." Jake and Aiyana crouched behind a pile of boulders near the canyon's only entrance, their weapons ready. Jake had his rifle and pistol, while Aiyana held an old knife she'd managed to keep hidden during her captivity. It wasn't much against 4 armed men, but it was better than nothing. "I have idea," Aiyana whispered, pointing to a narrow ledge that ran along the canyon wall about 20 feet up. "I climb up there. Come down behind them when they enter canyon." "Too dangerous," Jake replied. "If you fall, I not fall. Apache children learn to climb before we learn to walk." She studied the rock face with an expert eye. "You stay here. Make noise, draw them, and I get above them." Jake didn't like the plan, but he had to admit it was their best chance. The canyon was a natural trap easily defended from the entrance, but also impossible to escape from if they were overwhelmed. "Be careful," he said, gripping her shoulder briefly. "Don't take unnecessary risks." "Same to you," she replied with a small smile that transformed her serious face. "Do not die." "Jake Morrison, I think maybe you are a good man." Watching Aiyana scale the seemingly impossible rock face was like watching something supernatural. She moved with the fluid grace of someone born to wild places, finding handholds and footholds that Jake couldn't even see. Within minutes, she had disappeared onto the ledge above, becoming one with the shadows. The first of their pursuers appeared at the canyon entrance shortly after Tom Hartley, the youngest and most reckless of the brothers. He peered into the canyon suspiciously, his rifle ready, but his positioning sloppy. "I see tracks leading in here," he called back to his companions, fresh ones. "Then go take a look," Joe Hartley replied from somewhere outside Jake's line of sight. "But be careful, Morrison's supposed to be good with a gun." Tom entered the canyon cautiously, followed by a man Jake didn't recognize, probably one of the drifters who hung around Devil's Creek looking for easy money. Both men moved with the overconfidence of predators who'd never faced real resistance. "Come on out, Morrison," Tom called. "We know you're in here with our property." Jake waited until both men were well inside the canyon before making his move. He stepped out from behind the boulders with his rifle trained on Tom Hartley. "The only property I see here belongs to me," Jake said calmly, "and you're trespassing on it." Tom spun around, bringing his own rifle up, but Jake was faster. His first shot took Tom in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending his weapon flying. The second man tried to dive for cover, but found himself face to face with Aiyana, who had dropped silently from the ledge behind him. The man's eyes went wide with shock at the sight of the Apache girl he thought was helpless. That moment of surprise was all Aiyana needed. Her knife found its mark with deadly precision, and the man dropped without making a sound. "Tom, Charlie, what's happening in there?" Joe Hartley's voice carried a note of panic now. Tom Hartley was on the ground, clutching his wounded shoulder and staring at Jake with a mixture of pain and disbelief. "You shot me. You actually shot me over some Apache squaw." "I shot you because you're a slave trader and a kidnapper," Jake replied coldly. "And if your brothers come in here, they'll get the same treatment." "Joe," Tom called out desperately, "they got Charlie. The girl's got a knife." The response was immediate. Gunfire erupted from the canyon entrance as Joe and his remaining companion tried to provide covering fire for a retreat. Bullets ricocheted off the rock walls, filling the air with deadly fragments of stone. Jake grabbed Aiyana and pulled her behind the boulder pile. As the canyon filled with the thunder of gunshots, "You all right?" "Yes, but they try to keep us trapped here, wait for us to run out of water." Jake had reached the same conclusion. The Hartley brothers had them pinned down. But they couldn't stay here indefinitely. The spring provided water, but they had no food, and eventually someone would come looking for the missing men. "We need to end this," Jake said grimly. He checked his ammunition enough for a fight, but not for a prolonged siege. "I know another way out," Aiyana said suddenly. "Small passage at back of canyon. Too narrow for horses, but people can crawl through." "Where does it lead?" "To ridge above entrance. We could get behind them." It was a risky plan, but Jake couldn't see any alternatives. Staying put meant eventual defeat, and trying to fight their way out through the entrance would be suicide. "Show me," he said. The passage Aiyana had mentioned was barely visible, a crack in the rock wall that looked too narrow for a child, let alone to adults. But when Jake examined it more closely, he could feel air moving through it, suggesting it did indeed lead to the outside. "You sure about this?" he asked. "My grandfather and I used this passage when I was small," Aiyana replied. "Is tight, but possible." They left Tom Hartley tied up in the canyon with his wounded shoulder and began the claustrophobic crawl through the rock passage. Jake had never been comfortable in tight spaces, and the tunnel seemed to press in on him from all sides as they inched forward in complete darkness. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, Jake saw a glimmer of light ahead. The passage opened onto a narrow ledge on the ridge overlooking the canyon entrance, giving them a perfect view of Joe Hartley and his companion, who were positioned behind rocks about 50 yards away. "They're watching the entrance," Jake whispered. "Don't know we're up here. What we do now?" Jake studied the situation carefully. He could probably take both men from this position, but killing should be a last resort. On the other hand, these men had kidnapped Aiyana, murdered her family, and intended to sell her into slavery. They weren't going to give up or change their ways. "Joe Hartley," Jake called down from the ridge. "This is your last chance to ride away." Both men spun around, trying to locate the source of his voice. When they spotted Jake and Aiyana on the ridge above, Joe's face twisted with rage. "You think you're smart, Morrison. Maybe you got the high ground, but we got time. And we got friends coming." "What friends?" Jake asked, though he had a sinking feeling he already knew. "Murphy sent riders to Tucson yesterday. There's men there who pay good money for Apache girls, and they don't like it when their business gets interrupted. They'll be here by tomorrow, with enough guns to take care of you permanent like." Jake felt his blood chill. If more slave traders were coming, his little rescue mission was about to become a much larger and deadlier conflict. "Then I guess we better finish this now," Jake said grimly. The gunfight that followed was brief but decisive. Jake's position on the ridge gave him a clear advantage, and his years of hunting and ranch work had made him an excellent marksman. When the shooting stopped, Joe Hartley and his companion were both dead, and the immediate threat was over. But as Jake and Aiyana made their way back down to collect their horses, both knew that their troubles were far from finished. If Murphy really had sent for reinforcements, they had perhaps a day's head start before more dangerous enemies arrived. "We need to get to my ranch," Jake said as they mounted up. "It's defensible, and I have friends there who'll help us." "These friends, they help Apache girl too?" Aiyana asked. "They'll help anyone I ask them to help," Jake replied with certainty. "That's what good friends do." As they rode hard toward the north, leaving behind the bodies of their pursuers and the hidden canyon that had sheltered them, Jake found himself wondering what he'd gotten himself into. He'd meant to perform a simple act of human decency, but it seemed he'd started a war instead. Looking at Aiyana riding beside him, proud, brave, and free, he decided it was a war worth fighting. The real battle is just beginning. Subscribe to see how Jake and Aiyana prepare to defend their newfound freedom against overwhelming odds. The Morrison Ranch sat in a valley surrounded by mesas and ridges that provided natural defensive positions. But Jake knew that even the best terrain wouldn't be enough. If Murphy's reinforcements arrived in force as they approached the ranch buildings in the late afternoon, Jake felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. Relief to be home, and apprehension about involving his ranch hands in what was likely to become a deadly conflict. "Your home is beautiful," Aiyana said as they rode through the gate. The ranch was indeed impressive, a large main house built of adobe and timber, surrounded by well-maintained corrals, barns, and bunkhouses. Cattle grazed peacefully in the nearby pastures, and the whole scene spoke of prosperity and careful management. "It's been in my family for 20 years, Jake replied with obvious pride. "My father started it with nothing but determination and a good eye for land." 3 men emerged from the main house as they approached Jake's foreman, Miguel Santos, and 2 ranch hands, Tom Bradley and Will Harper. Miguel was a man in his 40s with graying hair and intelligent eyes, while Tom and Will were younger cowboys who'd worked for Jake for several years. "Jeff," Miguel said, using the Spanish term for boss, "we were starting to worry. You were supposed to be back yesterday." "Had some complications in Devil's Creek," Jake replied, dismounting and helping Aiyana down from her horse. "Miguel, Tom, Will, I'd like you to meet Aiyana. She'll be staying with us for a while." The 3 men took in Aiyana's appearance, her Apache clothing, her obvious exhaustion, and the way she stayed close to Jake as if seeking protection. Miguel's experienced eye noted the rope marks on her wrists and the bruise on her cheek, and his expression darkened. "Complications?" he asked quietly. "The kind that might follow us here." Jake said grimly, "Miguel, can we talk privately?" While Jake explained the situation to his foreman, Aiyana stood uncertainly by the horses, studying the 3 ranch hands. Tom Bradley was openly staring at her with curiosity, while Will Harper seemed nervous about having an Apache on the ranch. But it was Miguel who surprised her by approaching with a gentle smile. "Señorita," he said in accented English, "welcome to our home. You must be tired and hungry after your journey." "Thank you," Aiyana replied carefully. "You are kind. My wife Carmen is in the kitchen. She will want to feed you and make sure you have everything you need." Miguel's voice carried genuine warmth. "Do not worry about the men who hurt you. Jake is a good man, and we will protect you." The kindness in his voice broke through some of Aiyana's defensive walls. For the first time since her capture, she felt like she might actually be safe. "Miguel," Jake called, having finished his explanation. "How many rifles do we have?" "Counting our personal weapons, maybe a dozen, plus ammunition for several days of fighting." Miguel's expression was grim but determined. "How many men are we expecting?" "Unknown, but probably more than we can handle with just the 4 of us." 5. Aiyana said quietly, "I can fight." All 4 men turned to look at her, and Jake saw the same fierce determination in her eyes that had impressed him at the trading post. "Aiyana, I appreciate the offer, but nothing," she interrupted, switching to perfect English that surprised everyone. "These men killed my family and sold me like an animal. You think I will hide while they come to finish what they started?" "You speak English better than you let on," Tom Bradley observed. "Missionaries came to our village when I was young," Aiyana explained. "I learned from them before." She didn't finish the sentence, but everyone understood. Jake made a decision that surprised even himself. "All right, Miguel, show her where we keep the spare rifles. If she's going to be in this fight, she should be properly armed." Over the next few hours, they prepared the ranch for siege. Jake's strategic eye had chosen the location while the main house sat on a slight rise, with clear fields of fire in all directions, while the barn and bunkhouse provided additional defensive positions. Miguel positioned men to cover all approaches, while Carmen Santos, Miguel's wife, made sure everyone was fed and that medical supplies were ready. Carmen had taken immediately to Aiyana, treating her like the daughter she'd never had. She provided clean clothes, tended to the girl's injuries, and insisted she eat a proper meal despite Aiyana's protests that she wasn't hungry. "You are too thin," Carmen said firmly in Spanish, which Aiyana understood perfectly, "and you have been through too much for someone so young. Let me take care of you." "She's right," Jake said, joining them in the kitchen. "You need to rest and recover your strength." "I am strong enough to fight," Aiyana insisted. "I know you are, but being strong doesn't mean you have to carry every burden alone. Let us help you." That evening, as they waited for the attack they all knew was coming, Jake found Aiyana sitting on the porch of the main house, looking out at the vast landscape beyond the ranch. The setting sun painted the mesas in shades of red and gold, and for a moment, the scene was almost peaceful. "Beautiful country," Jake said, settling beside her. "Yes, my people have lived here for many generations. Every rock, every tree has story." Aiyana's voice was soft with memory. "My grandmother used to say that the land remembers everything, all the joy and sorrow, all the births and deaths. What would your grandmother think of this situation? Of you fighting alongside white men against other white men?" Aiyana considered the question seriously. She would say that good and evil exist in all peoples, that the color of skin matters less than the color of heart. She looked directly at Jake. "You have good heart, Jake Morrison. So does Miguel. And Carmen. What about Tom and Will? Tom is curious, but not cruel. Will is afraid, but trying to be brave. They are not bad men, just inexperienced with Apache." Jake was impressed by her perceptive analysis of his men. "You read people well. Apache children learn early to watch, to listen, to understand what people not say with words. My life often depended on knowing who could be trusted. And what do you see when you look at me?" Aiyana studied his face in the fading light. "I see man who risked everything for stranger, who could have walked away from trading post and forgotten Apache girl who meant nothing to him. But you did not walk away." "No, I didn't." "Why? What made you different from all other men who saw me on that platform?" Jake struggled to find words for feelings he didn't fully understand himself. "I guess because I believe that how we treat the most vulnerable among us defines who we really are. You were helpless in that moment, and those men were going to destroy you for profit. I couldn't be the kind of man who walks away from that, even knowing it might cost you your life, even knowing that." Aiyana nodded slowly, as if his answer confirmed something she'd suspected. "My father would have liked you. He always said that true warrior fights not for glory or revenge, but to protect those who cannot protect themselves." Their conversation was interrupted by Miguel's urgent voice from the lookout post. "Riders coming, at least 8, maybe more." Jake and Aiyana quickly joined the other defenders at their positions. Through the gathering darkness, they could see torches approaching more men than Jake had expected, all heavily armed and moving, with the confidence of people who expected easy victory. "Morrison," a voice called from the darkness. "This is Captain Wade Thornton, representing certain business interests in Tucson. You have something that belongs to our clients." "Nothing here belongs to you or your clients," Jake called back. "The Apache girl does. She was legally purchased property, and you stole her. Return her now, and we might let you live. She's not property. She's a human being, and she's under my protection." Laughter echoed across the valley, harsh, cruel laughter that made Aiyana's skin crawl with remembered fear. "Protection," Thornton called. "Look around you, Morrison. You're outnumbered 3 to 1. This can end easy or hard, your choice." "Then I guess it ends hard," Jake replied. The attack began immediately, with muzzle flashes lighting up the darkness as the raiders tried to overwhelm the ranch's defenses through sheer firepower. But Jake's men were in strong positions, and they knew their territory. The initial assault was beaten back, with heavy casualties among the attackers. "They're falling back," Will called from his position near the barn. "Don't get overconfident," Jake warned. "They're just testing our defenses. The real attack will come from multiple directions." He was right. The second assault came from 3 sides simultaneously, with some attackers trying to fire the barn, while others attempted to storm the main house. The fighting was fierce and close, with both sides taking casualties. Aiyana proved herself to be as deadly as she'd claimed, picking off attackers with precise rifle shots while moving like a ghost between defensive positions. Her knowledge of Apache fighting tactics served them well as she anticipated enemy movements and suggested defensive strategies that Jake's men wouldn't have considered. Behind the water tank, she called to Tom, who was being flanked by two raiders. Her warning shot dropped one of them, while Tom's return fire took care of the other. The battle raged for over an hour before the attackers finally withdrew, leaving several dead and carrying their wounded with them. Jake's defenders had held, but they'd used a lot of ammunition, and Miguel had taken a bullet in the leg. "They'll be back," Jake said grimly as Carmen tended to Miguel's wound. "And next time they'll be smarter about it." "Maybe not," Aiyana said quietly. She was staring out into the darkness where the attackers had retreated. "Listen." Jake strained his ears and heard what she meant: shouting voices, angry arguments, the sound of men who were discouraged and divided. "Sounds like they're having a disagreement about tactics," Tom observed. "Or about whether this Apache girl is worth dying for," Will added hopefully. "Thornton won't give up easily," Jake said. "Men like that don't like to lose, especially when there's money involved." But as the night wore on with no further attacks, it became clear that something had changed in the enemy camp. Dawn revealed a few scattered bodies, but no sign of the main force. They had withdrawn completely, leaving behind only the evidence of their failed assault. "Think they're gone for good?" Miguel asked, wincing as Carmen changed his bandage. "Maybe," Jake replied, though he remained cautious. "Or maybe they've decided to try a different approach." The answer came 2 days later when a lone rider approached. Under a white flag, it was Captain Thornton himself, looking considerably less confident than he had during the night attack. "Morrison," he called. "I want a parley." Jake met him in the yard, rifle in hand, while Aiyana watched from the porch. Thornton was a hard-looking man with cold eyes and scars that spoke of a violent life, but Jake could see defeat in his posture. "Had enough?" Jake asked bluntly. "Maybe," Thornton admitted. "You cost me 6 good men, and the boys are starting to wonder if one Apache girl is worth this much trouble." "She's not just one Apache girl," Jake said firmly. "She's a human being with rights and dignity, something you wouldn't understand." "Rights?" Thornton laughed bitterly. "This is the frontier, Morrison. The only rights people have are the ones they can enforce with guns." "Then I guess her rights are pretty well enforced." Thornton studied Jake's face, seeing the implacable determination there. "All right, I'll make you a deal. You keep the girl, but you compensate my clients for their loss. Say $300. Go to hell." Jake replied without hesitation. "500. The answer is no at any price. Now get off my land before I decide you're trespassing." Thornton's face darkened with anger, but he could see that Jake wasn't going to budge. "This isn't over, Morrison. Men like me don't forget. Slights like this. Men like you usually don't live long enough for it to matter." Jake replied calmly. After Thornton rode away, Jake found Aiyana still standing on the porch, tears streaming down her face. "What's wrong?" he asked gently. "Nothing wrong," she said, wiping her eyes. "Everything right. For first time since my family died, I feel free, really free." "You are free," Jake said firmly. "And you always will be, as long as I have anything to say about it. What happens now? I cannot stay here forever, bringing danger to your home." Jake had been thinking about the same question. "Actually, I was hoping you might consider staying permanently. This ranch could use someone with your skills." And he hesitated, then continued honestly. "I could use the company. It gets lonely out here. You want me to stay? As what?" "As family." Jake said simply. "As my daughter, if you'll have me." "As a father?" Aiyana stared at him in wonder, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "You would adopt me? Apache girl with no family, no dowry, nothing to offer?" "You have everything to offer," Jake replied. "Courage, intelligence, skill, and a good heart. What more could a father want in a daughter?" When Aiyana hugged him, Jake felt something he hadn't experienced since his own father's death: the deep satisfaction of being part of a real family. They had both lost everything that mattered to them, but somehow, in finding each other, they had found a way to start over. 6 months later, Jake Morrison officially adopted Aiyana Morrison in a ceremony at the territorial courthouse. The same judge who processed the paperwork remarked that he'd never seen a father and daughter who seemed more perfectly matched. "Blood doesn't make a family," Jake told him. "Love does. And choice does." As they rode home from the courthouse, Aiyana turned to her new father with a smile that could have lit up the entire territory. "Thank you, Papa," she said, "for seeing me as more than just an Apache girl to be bought and sold." "Thank you," Jake replied, "for teaching me that the best families are the ones we choose for ourselves. Thank you for following this incredible journey of courage, freedom, and found family." Subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming Western stories that celebrate the triumph of love over hate.